Napoleon is supposed to have said that an army only marches on its stomach. And I'm cognizant of the fact that supper time is nearby, so I will be very scrupulous about my time here. My title is Baptists Take Up and Read Tocqueville. Southern Baptists continue to make up the largest single denomination of Christians in the United States. They have a long and consistent history of championing religious freedom, going all the way back to the foundation of the Baptist movement in the 1600s with Thomas Helwys. In the first decades of the 21st century, Baptists have an opportunity to continue their old tradition of advancing religious freedom within the framework of the American constitutional order. A particularly important source that Baptists can and should rely on is Alexis de Tocqueville, a French Catholic. In 2 volumes, I'm going to get run out on a rail here, but I'm going to take this risk. In 2 volumes of his Democracy in America, Tocqueville foresaw and warned his audience of a number of risks attending the rise and irresistible spread of equality of conditions in human society. For our purposes, we're going to consider 3... Are you offended? Where are you going? I'm out of here. All right, 3 warnings that Tocqueville offered in his argument that this is the key. Tocqueville argued that religion was necessary to prevent tyranny and preserve freedom in a democratic arrangement. So first, Tocqueville was concerned about the risk of majoritarian tyranny in a democracy. Democracies are predicated on the fundamental principle that power arises from the bottom up, not from the top down. So, the sovereign power of a democratic nation is held not by the head of the state, not by the Christian prince, right, Jonathan? Not the legislative assembly, not the judge, not the court system, but the people. And the fact that sovereignty rests with the people means that the people have the freedom to make whatever laws they want, provided those laws represent the attitudes and preferences of the majority. This is what the post-liberals critique about classical liberalism. And Tocqueville was struck by the fact that one need not refer to the abstract principle of popular sovereignty in order to grasp its significance. One need only look to America. Tocqueville said, if there is a single country in the world where one can hope to appreciate the dogma of the sovereignty of the people, that country is surely America. In democratic America, rule by majority was the standard because sovereignty rested with the people. Think about the preamble of the Constitution, we the people of the United States of America. But how easy it could be for majorities to use their power to tyrannize minorities. Tocqueville said, once the majority has formed on a question, there are, so to speak, no obstacles that can, I shall not say stop, but even delay its advance and allow it the time to hear the complaints of those it crushes as it passes. So what he's saying is, in a democracy, the majority controls freedom of speech. Think about the time when we were talking about gay marriage. You know, there was a time when we were talking about it, when the country was debating it and, you know, considering it on its merits and its demerits. But in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled. And now, who's talking about it anymore? Hardly anybody. So that dynamic, that phenomenon is unique to democracies, Tocqueville said. The second risk to freedom that Tocqueville saw was that of a democratic people's innate preference for equality over liberty. Americans viewed equality of conditions as an ideal for which to strive. But Tocqueville stressed that that same equality tends towards tyranny more than it tends towards freedom. Individuals in an equal society pursue well-being and pleasure in the same ways, but Tocqueville observed that political power could still be reserved to a select few. So a despot could be the equal of his fellow citizens. except in that he possessed and consolidated political power, and the fellow citizens did not. Furthermore, equality yields short-term gains, measured in material possessions and pleasures. But freedom is attained through sacrifice over long periods of time. Taste for equality was more suited to human nature than for freedom, because the benefits of equality inspire passion, whereas the benefits that citizens enjoy from freedom were hard-won. So Tocqueville observed that democratic people, quote, will tolerate poverty, will tolerate enslavement, will tolerate barbarism, but they will not tolerate aristocracy. A third danger to democratic societies was a form of despotism that Tocqueville feared was uniquely pernicious when equality of conditions prevailed. And that kind of despotism, Tocqueville wrote, will resemble nothing that has preceded it in the world. Our contemporaries would not find its image in their memories. Tocqueville could not find the right word for such a despotism, so he described its characteristics and its effects. So the despotism started with equality, in which everyone indulged in what Tocqueville described as the small and vulgar pleasures with which they fill their souls. People possessed their material wealth and their creature comforts, those things that filled their time and captured their attention. And such people were surrounded by their intimates, their immediate family, their immediate friends, like-minded people, but were isolated from their neighbors and isolated from, their communities. And people such as this live for themselves. They have no mind for the well-being of their fellow citizens because they pay them no attention. When people's immediate needs and wants could be satisfied with material pleasures, and when citizens no longer conducted themselves out of concern for the common good, then, Tocqueville said, an immense tutelary power is elevated, which alone takes charge of assuring their enjoyments and watching over their fate. Read the nanny state. Such a despotic power would rule over citizens like children, taking care to provide for their whims as long as they ceased for thinking of them for themselves, from acting on their own free will, and from taking responsibility for their own well-being. So political power would become supreme in the hands of such a benevolent tyrant, one that relieved citizens, the way Tocqueville said it, relieved citizens entirely of the trouble of thinking and the pain of living. Equality of conditions prepared people for such a fate. And this is what he meant when he argued that democratic people would more readily give up freedom than they would give up equality. Equality's promise was cheap. Freedom's benefits just cost too much. Now, we live in a society that is defined by equality of conditions because we live in a democracy. So, the question in front of us, and the question we've been considering in the last couple of hours, is how to preserve freedom when equality of conditions sets the stage for a very distinctive kind of despotism that's tailor-made for democracy. Well, Tocqueville argued that religion is necessary for the preservation of liberty. Now, in 1831, when Tocqueville came to America, Christianity, Protestant Christianity, was the dominant religious, belief system, faith system in America. And Tocqueville was fine with that. He didn't come to America. He was a Catholic, but he didn't protest that America was not a Catholic nation. In fact, he even compared Protestant Christianity to Islam in democracy in America. He said that the Quran was a political document as much as a religious one, but the religion of Jesus Christ was focused primarily on the person's relationship to God and to others. Sounds kind of like a Baptist to me. Tocqueville scholar Norman Graebner noted that, quote, it was this quality in Christianity that permitted it to exist in a cultivated democratic civilization. Now, when you read Tocqueville, you'll find that he begins his work by starting with the point of departure. And Tocqueville's famous point of departure in Democracy in America was the Pilgrim and the Puritan founding of New England, and the singular form of Christianity that those colonial founders brought with them to American shores. He described this brand of Christianity as democratic and republican, and in accord with politics from the moment of colonial inception, all the way to 1831, when Tocqueville was visiting New England. While there was no federally established religion in America, Tocqueville argued that religion was still indispensable to American political and social life. He said religion should be considered the first of their political institutions. It was essential to freedom because freedom was not possible without a consensus on morality. And where did morality come from? It came from religion. So because of this, Tocqueville could say, quote, if religion does not give them, that is the Americans, the taste for freedom, it singularly facilitates their use of it. Americans so closely regarded religion's necessity to freedom that they often conflated the two. And then furthermore, Tocqueville was astonished to find that disestablished religion's power was so great that Americans saw the need to preserve religion as a bulwark for Republican institutions in the settled eastern states for the sake of the emerging American civilization in the western states and the territories where those institutions were very fragile. So Americans perceived then a duty to protect the rights and freedoms of others in order to protect their own. And protecting freedom meant protecting religion. Religion served as democracy's greatest advantage, according to Tocqueville. While equality was a great good, it encouraged humanity's base instincts of selfishness, isolation, and materialism. Every religion, especially Christianity, pointed people beyond their immediate fortunes and cast their attention on things that transcended mere creature comforts, like immortality of the soul. Religion imposed responsibilities along with privileges, so that people look to the flourishing of others as well as the flourishing of themselves. And democratic societies, dictated by equality of conditions, encouraged individuals to be obsessed with self. But religion mitigates those selfish materialist tendencies by balancing rights with duties. Tocqueville said, religious people are therefore naturally strong in precisely the spot where democratic peoples are weak. This makes very visible how important it is that men keep to their religion when becoming equal. And one of the reasons Tocqueville thought religion was necessary to human freedom was that he saw religion springing from human nature. Religion was, natural to human nature. It was prior to government's claim on human obedience, which is something that Baptists have always argued. Every human action was rooted in the human conception of God, their place in human society, and the duties that they had towards their fellows. And corresponding to this, humans pursued their own interests, and religion guided the pursuit of those interests, especially here in America, where we have religious freedom. One of the great ironies Tocqueville saw among Americans was that he didn't think they were that virtuous. He didn't think that Americans were that concerned with virtue for virtue's sake. But they were willing to do virtuous things in order to gain something of benefit to themselves. Americans, Tocqueville said, complacently show how the enlightened love of themselves constantly brings them to aid each other and disposes them willingly to sacrifice a part of their time and their wealth to the good of the state. So for Tocqueville, every human action was informed by religion, and also every human action was informed by the pursuit of self-interest rightly understood. encountered no less in the mouth of the poor man than in that of the rich, as Tocqueville said. Both religion and self-interest, rightly understood, were basic to human nature. While religion had its source in human nature, in America it had its strength in the constitutional distinction between the sacred and the secular. Tocqueville saw that everyone in America, clergy included, agreed on the necessity of this distinction in order that religion might maintain its social force. In France, religious and political concerns were so closely joined as to make it difficult to know where one began and the other ended. And the effect was that religion devolved into just another political faction with a short lifespan. But in America, religion transcended politics and political squabbling. Clergymen focused their attention on the consolation of all miseries and the contemplation of another world, Tocqueville said. And the effect of this was that believers and unbelievers alike recognized the power of religion and its role in preserving freedom. Because religion's basic to human nature, any kind of artificial support lent to it by the state would render it impotent. So religion does not need political power's assistance to live, and in serving them, it can die, Tocqueville said. So very importantly then for Tocqueville, religion was simultaneously a product of and a creator of free institutions and free behaviors in America. And specifically, religion was reflected in Americans' public spirit, that patriotism in which public interests and private interests were merged together through active citizenship at the local level. Religion was born out of political and civic associations, those uniquely American institutions that arose out of an awareness from birth to the necessity of self-reliance, rather than on reliance on distant governmental jurisdictions to solve practical problems. Americans formed associations to pursue goals of public security, commerce and industry, and morality and religion, as Tocqueville said. And the doctrine of self-interest, rightly understood, meant that every American understood how and when to make sacrifices for the good of the whole. While Tocqueville acknowledged this kind of doctrine did not make for a virtuous society, it did make for an ordered one. And order was actually a virtue, learned first in the home, where religion fundamentally informed the mores, the basic intellectual and moral character of the people. The mores then, in turn, influenced the laws. So as a product of and initiator of free institutions and behaviors, religion was indispensable to freedom in democratic America. But religion as religion could not preserve freedom isolated from public spirit. Religion could be used to combat freedom and reject human equality. Freedom could be used to combat religion when religion is enlisted in the aid of a particular political faction. And religion, particularly Protestant Christianity, could also be used by greedy entrepreneurs for financial gain. In Tocqueville scholar James Schliefer's words, as simply another business within a wider commercial society. I'm thinking of someone like Joel Osteen or somebody like that. Catholic Christians were prone to deny religious freedom to non-Catholics. In America, if Catholics ever became the majority, Tocqueville was afraid that they would persecute Protestants. Moreover, if Christians overlooked the present in favor of the afterlife, religion would be too individualistic, too otherworldly, too moralistic for public benefit. But public spirit directed both religion and freedom to their best ends, because public spirit was focused on a voluntary balancing of private and public goods, of rights with responsibilities, of individual privileges and duties to others. It directed religion away from despotic, individualistic, or base tendencies and toward the ideals of the Gospels, that is, right relationship with God and with others. Public spirit also directed freedom away from license and towards self-restraint. Harvey Mansfield summarized Tocqueville on this dynamic by saying, A people, like an individual person, makes itself more powerful with self-restraint, not less powerful. Since for Tocqueville, public spirit fostered the best in both religion and freedom, the mediating influence of public spirit between religion and freedom is very clear in Tocqueville's thought. Now, we are living among a population that seriously considers the overturning of the American constitutional order as desirable and even necessary. Leftist reimagining of America, represented by works like the 1619 Project, and rightist wool gathering about setting up a Christian monarchy for a Christian state, are both revolutionary in their methods and in their aims, and even though they're setting their sights and very different goals. But the answer to the challenges of our times does not lie in innovative politico-theological solutions like either Christian nationalism or revolutionary wokeism, but it's to gain wisdom from the experience and reflection of those who have gone before us. So Baptists, take up Tocqueville and read. Thank you.